Hey folks, sorry I'm not there in person today. Well, that's what I've got you don't want, but I just wanted to run through some of the basics for Lab 3 today, just so you get a kind of visual for what we're hoping to achieve, and maybe talk about some of the stuff that I didn't write all that clearly in the lab description. Let's see, so administrative stuff first. Quiz 2, since I'm not there, if you want to do it in the lab, you're more than welcome to, but you can take it from home, you can take it from wherever it's convenient, and I've set it up to be available from 9 o'clock today until 9 o'clock Thursday evening. So basically from the morning of the 8th to the evening of the 9th. If you just find a kind of a 1 hour window in there someplace that works for you, and yeah, connect to VIU Learn as usual. And yeah, pretty much usual quiz rules. I'll try and be available on Discord and email for any parts that you might have questions about. And what I want to do in the video today is to just walk through the part 1 exercise, right? This will be our usual cycle of we'll have one part of the lab this week and one part of the lab next week. So today I'll just kind of run through the part 1. Let's see, and again, what we're trying to introduce this time around is the use of recursion. Right, we talked about this in the lectures last week. So we're just going to take kind of the code that we used for Lab 2 for part 1, where we were getting the height and calculating the falling time. We had a function to go through and get the height from the user, do some error checking on it, and either use that or replace it with 0. So today we'll just throw a quick change into that so that we can allow the user to try again as often as needed. And then the other thing I wanted to do was to set up the use of loops, which we introduced in the lectures this week, to go through and allow Ricky to do multiple jumps. So instead of having just our one jump in the main routine, we'll have a loop in the main routine that allows Ricky to do jump after jump after jump, and essentially after each one, Ricky will choose to either continue, do another jump, or quit. So we'll walk through an example of recursion, an example of loops, and see where we get to from there. Let's see, so we'll have our usual setup process, right? We'll run the make 159 command to get lab 3, and then I want to, since the code that we're doing, other than introducing the recursion and the loops, is very similar to what we did in part 1 of lab 2, again, I would probably recommend copying across your lab 2 files to use as a starting point for your lab 3, so you don't have to retype everything. So again, we've just got that cycle where we'll get into our 159 directory, copy our stuff from lab 2 into lab 3, right? We'll do that for part A and for part B. And then we can go in and do our usual kind of gedit or pico or whatever it happens to be, and make lab 2 or lab 3 AX or make lab 3 BX and work from there. So that should be pretty much the usual cycle. I guess we'll run through that on a quick sample to show you what all that should look like, and this should pretty much be like last lab when we did something similar. Let's see, so we're going into our 159. Oops, no, pardon me. Let's not do that. Let's do our make first. So make 159. I don't think I've done this on this account yet, so it should be okay to create one. So again, usual idea, we want to create a lab 3 and get all the files I've posted for it. And hopefully this goes off and succeeds. Looking good so far, yay, looks like it worked out okay. So we'll go into our 159, if we do an ls, then yes, we should see a lab 3 in there. So that looks good. So what I'm going to do now is copy from my lab 2 directory, my lab2a.cpp, and I want to put it in lab 3 as lab3a.cpp. So I'm going to copy that file across, And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the part B. And now I can go into my lab 3. And if I have a look in there, if I have a look at my lab3a.cpp, it should have the code that I finished up with for my lab 2 solution. So now I'm going to start my cycle of editing lab3a.cpp, doing my makes and doing my test runs. All right, so let's go back to our instructions here for a sec. One of the things that we will be playing with that we haven't done much with in the last couple of weeks is playing with character data type. So we're going to get the user to enter C to continue, or pretty much anything else to quit as it's running through the main routine, getting to prompt over and over again. So I will introduce in a little bit the use of the char data type, and the way we code single characters in C++ is to throw them in single quotes. So if I have quote X quote in my code, that represents the character X. So that'll come back a little bit later on. All right, so for part 1, again, we want to pretty much go through the same ideas before, except that now in that getHeight function, we want to modify it so that if the user enters something bad, we still give them the error message and clean up the buffer if we need to, but now we're going to get them to try again. So we're going to do that with recursion, and then we're going to go through and modify the main routine to have a loop that lets the user do jump after jump after jump. So for that first part, where we're going into the function that we had created to get height, where we were going off, prompting the user enter a height, read it in, we were checking if cin failed, and we were checking if they entered a negative number, and then we were either returning the value that we want that they entered, or a 0 if they entered something invalid. So we're going to take that same code, and all we want to do now is, in those 2 error cases, instead of just having our h turn to 0, we'll add a message to ask them to try again, and we'll try and call getHeight all over again, and whatever it gives back, right, that's going to go off and start an entirely new run of please enter, a height, and do the error checking on it. So we're going to call that. It'll store the result in H, and we'll do that essentially in both of the error cases, where we'll say, okay, well, we'll get them to try again, and thus eventually we'll have a valid value that we're returning in H. So that's the first change that we want to do. And again, this is by far the simplest of the things that we'll tackle here. So let me just get my windows working correctly here. Keep trying. There we go. All right, so I'm going to use Vim as my editor here because Pico drives me nuts. But I'm going to edit my lab3a.cpp, work my way down to my getHeight function. And so we had those 2 places where we discovered that something was wrong. And this time I'm just going to throw in a message asking the user to try again. Please try again. And once I've done that, I want to call getHeight again. So I want to call my getHeight again. And it's going to go off and run through the whole cycle and get a valid value from me. But it's going to give me back an answer that I want to send back as my answer. So I'm going to set H to getHeight in both cases, and then return H. All right, so if they do mess up, it'll try the whole thing all over again, get the answer from that, and pass that back as the answer to the current call. So let's see if we can make a lab3ax. And hey, that looks good so far. And if we give it a try, It asks for the jump height in meters. If I enter something like -7, hopefully it tells me, oh yeah, oh, I should get rid of that replaced with 0 message. So there's something for us to fix. But yeah, it's telling me that a negative height was entered, please try again. And then that recursive call to get height is giving me its prompt, saying, okay, please enter a jump height in meters. Maybe I enter something bad again, so this time I enter complete garbage. And it tells me, non-numeric height entered, and again, I've got to get rid of that using 0 instead. And it asks me to please try again. And eventually, I type in something valid, and that should send the 6.5 back to the previous call to jump height, which should send it back to the original call to jump height, which should send it back to the main routine. And yeah, we should get the behavior that we want. So let's go in and fix those two using zeros instead. So now it should have just my error message and then the please try again. And recompile, and I goofed, so this is telling me that I'm probably missing a semicolon somewhere before line 53. So let's go to line 53. I've got a stray less than sitting at the end there. That's what's causing that. So let's try one more time. And if we, again, try foo, -3, -12, blah, and then eventually something valid. Yay. All right. So looks good for the first part of part 1, where we're introducing our recursion. So now let's give a try at the part where we want to use some loops. So we want to go through and take essentially this, we had this set of actions that was involved in getting a height from the user, calculating the fall time, pausing, displaying the warning, the duck. And what we want to do now is do that whole thing over and over and over again. So I'm going to take that chunk and stick it in a loop that essentially just repeats until the user wants to quit. So I'm going to stick kind of the structure of the loop in first, and then we'll figure out what has to happen to get them to quit. So let's stick that part in first. So I'm going to stick this kind of do while around the outside. So basically repeat all of this stuff over and over and over again. And I'm just going to have to figure out how to get this condition that tells me whether I want to stop or continue. But we'll worry about that in just a second. So let's go through and find our main routine here. And so this chunk in the middle, I just want to wrap in one of these do while loops that is going to have some kind of a condition to quit or continue in it, but I'll worry about that in a sec. And again, whenever I wrap something inside something else, I'm going to indent it a few spaces. So now I've got this stuff inside my do while loop, so I'm going to indent it another 3 spaces, or whatever you pick as your indent amount. And now it's going to do this stuff over and over and over again. Now, you can't compile at the moment because I haven't told it what kind of a condition to check. So what do we want to do? Well, I want to get a character from the user. I want the user to type in a character, like a C or a Q or something like that. And if they enter a C, I want to quit. Or pardon me, if they enter C, I want to continue. And if they enter anything else, I want to quit. So what I'm going to do is create a character variable up here for my user choice, or my user quit or continue. How about we call it that? How about we call it quit or continue? And so this will be the user's choice whether to continue or not. So slightly different message than I put in the web page, but again, same sort of idea. I want to go through and eventually get the user to enter a character. So what I need to do now is to say, well, I better ask the user to specify if they want to quit or continue. So I can do my something like enter C to continue, jump again, or anything else to quit. And then I'm going to read in whatever they type, whatever single character they type in as a response, and I'm going to stick it in that quit or continue. So we're getting closer. Now we do the bunch of actions, and then we ask the user if they want to do this again or not. And so in my condition here, well, if they pick continue, I want to go back and do the loop again. So if the character they entered was a C, I want to go back and do this again. So I want to compare what they typed in, quit or continue, and if it's equal to the character C, I want to go back and do it again. So this should get it to repeat over and over and over again, right? Asking them after each jump. And hopefully, I haven't introduced anything too buggy here. So compiled okay, so that's a good start. So enter the jump height in meters. Let's say I pick a 10, and that worked. And there, it gave me my result for that first jump, and it's asking me to enter C to continue or anything else to quit. So if I type in a C, it should let me do this again. Right? So I'm into the same cycle again. So I'll pick a new height. I'll pick a new height. Oops. Yeah, and jumping the gun here. So I got my C to continue or anything else to quit. I entered the character 9, and so it looked at that and said, that's not a C, and it quit. So that actually behaved the way it should. Just in terms of one of the things that you might notice is that whenever we're doing input, it ignores any spaces I put in, any blank lines I put in, and it waits for me to actually type in kind of a non-space value. And the same thing happens when I'm typing in characters. If I enter a bunch of spaces, it's going to ignore this. If I enter some blank lines, it's going to ignore it. And then eventually, I throw in a Q or something like that, and it's going to quit. So, just as a heads up there. But that is pretty much the idea that I wanted to get through for this one, was to go through and get our basic structure working so that we can kind of repeat as often as necessary. So now we've got a loop that's working, we've got recursion that's working. Let's see, and then for part 2, and again, we'll discuss this next week, I'm going to get you to do the same sort of idea with the B portion of the lab, where you had your function to get the mass. I'll get you to use recursion to repeat and do that, to repeat until they get something valid. And for getting the area, I'll get you to use a do while loop to get it to repeat over and over and over again until they enter something valid. So, but we'll worry about that next week. For now, I think you're pretty much good for a make submit. So hopefully I set that up correctly as well. And yeah, looks good. All right, so that's the plan for this one. If you have questions, if you run into issues with this or with the quiz, fire me an email or jump on the Discord, and I'll try and keep checking that today. Other than that, hopefully I will see folks tomorrow or Monday.